guests, and most distinguished audience. As I'm not going to be reading a speech, I am speaking extemporaneously. Nevertheless, I'm recording my own speech. Experience teach me to do that. I must start out from the beginning in saying, many people have asked me, is it possible for white people to teach black studies? And I have said, hell no. A man's history is not just some dates and names written down. History has emotion in it. And history is interpretation of events passed by. No white man can interpret my history for me, just as no Irishman will accept the interpretation of Irish history by an Englishman. Many people, whenever I start to speak about my slavery and my enslavement, I always hear that the Jews were enslaved, as if the Jews were somebody else than me. But if they said some Europeans call themselves Jews, then I know what they're talking about. So already you could see why I have to tape my own speech. Because I know the governor will hear about it in the morning, probably tonight. And most of us here look like niggers. That's what they call us, PhDs or not. And some of us are going to differ with us because we need the endorsement of somebody else to tell us when we write our history correctly. But I say, including Wayne University, that when the African Studies Department remains separate from the Black Studies Department, that's a damn shame. How are we going to have a Black Studies Department and don't have the African Department under the Black Studies Department? When it is in Africa, Black Studies started. You got black because you came from Africa. And for those of you who are going to tell me about your Blackfoot Indian mama, and your salmon-skinned French papa, I want you to know that you don't get discriminated because you came from German stock, but you get discriminated when they can see the least little tip of Africa jumping out you know what. And it is that part that I'm going to deal with to show you that it is nothing to be ashamed of, and secondly, that there would be no European out of this cave if it wasn't for that same Africa. I start out by saying there is no such thing as Greek philosophy. When a university speak about Greek philosophy, they're a bunch of damn liars. And it goes to anyone that would say, anyone, black or white, that would say there's such a thing as Greek philosophy, then I say that sucker didn't read. Who are the so-called Greek philosophers, and when did they start with Greek philosophy? The first of the Greeks that we're to hear of that's supposed to have had any kind of education is Homer. And we're to hear of African civilizations, and that's using that word with quotation marks. Thousands of years before there was a Greece. Even before that land was called Pyrrhus, Pyrrhs. We are told that there was some guy called Hippocrates, and he was the father of medicine. How the hell could Hippocrates be the father of medicine? And we find him taking an oath to Imhotep, the great African whom he called Escalipsus. Imhotep lived more than 2,000 years before the birth of Hippocrates. And yet, Hippocrates is the father of medicine. The same damn nonsense we heard again with Herodotus. Herodotus, they say, is the father of history. How could he be the father of history? And the first time we hear of Herodotus, he's on his way going to Egypt to get his education in history. And that's 457 before the boy named Jesus. We get to him in a minute. I hope you ministers got a strong heart. But that same Herodotus, the professors in the various university quotes, but they do not quote Herodotus book 2, because Herodotus book 2 states this, and I am going to quote. He said, the Colchians, Ethiopians, and Egyptians got thick lips, broad nose, woolly hair, and they are burnt of skin. Man, he was talking about soul brothers and soul sisters. He was talking about northern Africa, Egypt in particular, Ethiopia, and culture. And culture was what is today called the Middle East, where Israel and Syria is today. Socrates was tried and he committed suicide. They didn't try him for teaching Greek philosophy. They tried him for teaching a foreign philosophy and corrupting the minds of the minor with the things that he had learned from the Africans. The Africans blew his mind. What they're talking about, here's Plato. Plato is speaking in his Republic, about winged steeds and chariots. And at the time when Plato was writing, Greece didn't have the first winged steed, which was a fast horse, or the first chariot. They fought their wars, including the Peloponnesian Wars, on the Mediterranean. They knew nothing about fighting with no chariots. Plato was a goddamn thief and a plagiarizer. The same as Aristotle was. When Aristotle came to Egypt, which was originally called Kemet and then Sais, the Hebrews are the one that call it Egypt. We get to that too. And when Aristotle came with Alexander in 332 before Christ, General Sutter, who later called himself Ptolemy I, after the death of Alexander, declared himself as such and had Aristotle to sack the library at the Grand Lodge of Luxor and all of the other repository of learning in Egypt. Aristotle is already 70 odd years old, and we are to hear these lying professors telling us, and they've told me that all true from the bachelor's to the doctorate degree, these bunch of lies. And I've had to sit there knowing the damn fools are lying and answer the question in order to pass. Man, I'm not sorry young black people blowing up these damn buildings when they tell them that junk. I had to stand there knowing that they're lying, because people saw to it that I read other books, that I read the Book of the Dead. My father saw to it that I read Man and His Gods. My father saw to it that I read the Osirian drama, the Papyrus of Andy. Those things that I'm naming to you exist before there was the first Jew in the world, before Adam and Eve was made by man. somebody come and tell me some damn nonsense about some Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve is the damnedest piece of fiction from mythology that ever existed to corrupt people. Same type of thing that told you, and you go to church every day to hear some chicken-licking minister get up there telling you some damn nonsense about some guy named Ham. That Ham watched his uncle's nakedness in the ark, and God got angry and turned people black because of that. In other words, that same thing is saying that there were no black people until Ham stared at his uncle's nakedness. Now, if Ham is in the boat with his uncle and his aunt, and he's going to waste time to stare at his uncle and his aunt is there, he's a jackass and a faggot. This piece of nonsense that have been perpetuated on black people for so long continue to be the basis upon which we rest our hopes. We're told persistently about a heaven up in the air. And when the Book of the Dead, the ancient papyrus of Ani, tells us that heaven, which they call the netherworld, is down. That's why the pyramids were built where the pharaohs placed their bodies as low as they can, because they're in that context of the religion of the worship of Ra, related to a God and a heaven in the inner part of the earth. We talk about Moses, Abraham, and all these kinds of things. And they start to tell us about the Pharaoh and Moses. And we feel, bunch of fools we are so sorry of what happened to Moses and the Hebrews. And we're dung in the Pharaoh, but we're so stupid we don't even ask them which Pharaoh. The word Pharaoh means king or queen. They don't even say which Pharaoh Moses had to fight with. Now, we know if there was a Moses based upon that book called the Bible, that Old Testament, and it says the first book is Exodus, or the first book of, it's Genesis, the first book of Moses. Now, if they had no book until Moses, because he wrote the first book of Genesis, damn, that's a young religion. Moses was just yesterday. I haven't touched Zinjanthropus Boise yet. And that African was 1,750,000 years ago. Now that means that Adam didn't know that Eve had that thing yet. Look at that stupid Adam. You know that Adam was no African. It couldn't be. He's standing there and Eve is stark born naked. He is naked and he wait till a snake come down the tree to tell him that he got a snake. Man, and that's some, and I bet they were talking that nonsense all day long today. And you paid money to hear that minister talk that jive. Now, going back to this Ramsey and this Moses business. In the first place, you don't understand that Moses and Ramesses are two Africans. This whole damn thing is taking place in Africa. Egypt is still in Africa. I know that you may think it's in Washington with Dick Nixon, but it isn't there. Egypt is on the continent of Africa. Mount Sinai is still in Africa. And when you're talking about Moses and the Pharaoh, you're talking about two black men got an argument. And you ain't got no damn business taking no side. But if you got to take a side and you say you believe in the Bible, then you got to take the Pharaoh side. Moses was charged with what? The same book told you that Moses killed the Pharaoh's soldier. Now you're talking about law and order. And Moses broke the law. He killed the Pharaoh soldier. But whose law? God didn't give Moses no the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai yet. And yet there's a law against murder. Somebody lying. Because they said that the 10 Commandments came when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. That's a damn lie. There were laws against stealing before Moses reached Mount Sinai. Before Moses' mama's great-grandmother 10 times removed, there were laws against stealing. Man, the thing is there, if you read the Osirian drama in the coffin text, it is shown there 147 laws called the negative confession, which existed more than 7,000 years before the birth of Moses. And it is Moses that wrote that book called Genesis about some Adam and Eve. We find that Ramesses II, who Moses is supposed to have the argument, reigned in the year 1298 to 1232 before Christ. That would make them quite young people when you're talking about African history. And we continue to talk about African history, and we start with North Africa. African history didn't start in North Africa. It started around the Great Lakes of Africa. That's the Central East Africa. The pyramids got larger and larger as you went north and when you went south. From Mwanza, Nyanza. This last name that I just called Mwanza, Nyanza. You know it. Named after a corrupted English reprobate called a queen, Victoria. Who the hell give Victoria a lake in Africa? To name a lake after that wench. Victoria was worse than Adolf Hitler. She had more Africans killed than Hitler dreamt of that they were Jews. But no. You get white professors who tell you in the school, you got to answer it different. You got to answer that the British brought civilization to the Africans. That the Africans were waiting until the British come to bring. Oh, when the Romans captured the British, when Heraclius captured the British, he said them suckers were so stupid he couldn't even make slaves of them. No, I didn't write that. They wrote that themselves. So if you're going to blame anybody, blame them same white professor in their university. And talking about they bringing civilization to the Africans. Let's get the record straight. The Europeans did not come to West Africa until 1430 when the Portuguese arrived there. But we were in Europe as conquerors. See, my name isn't just what somebody just told you. My name is also Hannibal Barca. And I went in there in the Second Punic War. My father is Hamilcar Barca. And we took the whole of Sicily in the First Punic War. That's why Italians don't like me. Because I went in there and really darkened them up. Oh, I got more names than that. My name is Tariq. And I went into the whole Iberian Peninsula in the year 711 with 100,000 black soldiers. All the way up to France and locked up with Charlemagne. And he and I had it out. And I stood there until 1485. The last of my people been driven out of Granada, Spain. For over 700 years, and I carried in the youth I taught the European to take a common bath. You don't need to let me tell you, go read some European books that is testifying to it. Stanley Lane Poole wrote the very best book called The Moors in Spain. James Soames wrote another book called The Coast of the Barbary. And in those books and others speak about the common bath that the Africans brought in from Mauritania. We carried the use of linen as underwear. We built the Alhambra. We carried the theatrical arts to France with Alexander Dumas first, second, and third. What are they talking about? They haven't arrived in Europe yet. I mean in West Africa yet. When they came to West Africa, we had the empire of Songhai, or Songhai as you call it. We had the Truckler Empire already existing in Africa. Kanu states were already existing. The Manikongo and Bakongo Empire of the Congo states were already existing. Monomotapa was already existing. That's the whole empire that what is now called South Africa. Bunyoro states was existing. Kush, Ethiopia, was existing. The oldest nation on earth in historical records still was existing. Punt, which is today called Somaliland, was existing before they arrived. What civilization are they talking about? Talking about Christianity, how could the Europeans bring what they do not still have? And when they're talking about Christianity, it was Constantine the Great in the 4th century that made Europe a Christian nation. Ethiopia was already a Christian nation 124 years before, under the King Abraham. The church, the Christian church, started in Egypt with Pantheus and Origen, 2 Africans who became the 2 first bishops of the church. That time there were no pope yet. They ain't had no faggot running around with no little hat. Who made the church, the Christian church? Black people running around have a Jesus Christ in a black church, a blonde Jesus Christ, a blonde Mary, a blonde Joseph, blonde disciples, a blonde dog underneath the table in a black church. That part of the world that Jesus came from don't produce no blonde. If you blonde when you get there, in 3 months' time, you look like a chocolate cake. Let me tell you, it was Augustine, an African, called Saint Augustine today. Cyprian, another African. Augustine was from Numidia, Cyprian was from Carthage, and Tertullian, another African. And only one of those 3 Africans ever left Africa, and that was Augustine, and he left to teach in Milan and Rome for 1 year. Augustine is the fellow that wrote the Holy City of God on Christian doctrines and the Confessions. He describes himself in the Confessions, who he is. Described himself as an African, his mother Monica and his father Petricus, who were Mantians, the religion of the Mantians. Augustine is the one that brought libations into the even religion. Then these 3 black women that give Christianity their first martyrs. 3 black women, 3 African women, Felicita, Mimpano, and Perpetua. The North African church existed long before there was a church in Rome. This damn nonsense about Peter built a church in Rome. Man, these crackers can lie. talk a little bit more about some other little things here. You see why black PhDs don't like me and I stopped using that letter behind my name? Because you see, they ain't not going to tell no truth like that because they may not get their appointments next year. They may not renew their contract. I ain't worrying about no goddamn contract. If they worry, but let me tell you something, just like your mama went and scrubbed them floors to give you an education, then you're going to have to scrub floors if it means that you've got to deal with yourself. I got to live with me. And I'm a hell of a guy when I go to sleep. I want to rest. I don't want to be dreaming like Martin Luther King. Because I'm not going over no mountain. If I'm going over the mountain, somebody going with me. I'm the most violent, non-violent creature you have ever seen. You mess with my woman or my money, and you see how non-violent I could be. But getting back to where I was saying, we've got to understand, basically, that the Tarzan and Jane movies will still continue. We should be able to burn theaters down the public that still show that junk to our children. Because Monomatapa, the southernmost tip of Africa, when the Portuguese Bartolomeu Dias came there in 1486, he met the Africans there, and he wrote about them in the logs of his ship, and he described them as people wearing and bedecked with jewels the eyes a European have never seen. As late as the 17th century, we find Leo Frobenius, the German historian, speaking in terms of the people of West Africa. And I quote him, "Now, for leagues and leagues, you can see men, women, and children sitting on hassocks made of silk and velvet, their horses with bridles of gold and sapphire, studded with emeralds, the likes you have never seen." Now, this is a European way back there describing the West Africa he met when he arrived there. And some damn stupid, ignorant missionary going to come there and tell me that when he came to Africa, he met Africans eating each other. And the African didn't eat him yet. What kind of a jive? If the Africans were eating each other, how he got so close and an African didn't eat him? Are you going to eat pork chop every day and a lamb comes up and you don't try him once? No, but always remember when I started out, I said that no white man could teach black history. Because history includes the national pride of a people. The man who interprets your history and writes your history got you. If that's what you're going to accept. If you look at the geography maps, they got North Africa being Caucasian. They even got Ethiopia as Caucasian. I didn't even know I was a Caucasian. Thank you, Holy Father. The other night I saw a film put on by the National Geographic of Disgrace called, Association of something or the other. And they say Ethiopia was invaded by Negroes. You should see that thing if they play it again. The man that put that thing on must have diarrhea supreme. How could a man with any kind of hair, black people fighting all over the place, and he still got the nerves to put that thing on TV in 1970? You know some places that they had a revolution going, he would have never put on nothing else. That's why I tell you, there ain't no revelation yet. You're getting warm. You're getting your minds together. That's about all. Because if there was a revolution, he has put on his last film. it that they have to make North Africa and East Africa Caucasian? Because Zinzanthropus boise, Boskop man, you get Zimbabwe man, which they call Rhodesia man. Something talk about that. Who the hell was Rhodes to name a country in Africa Rhodesia? Can you imagine the Jews naming a country, naming Israel out of Hitler land? Cecil Rhodes was worse than Adolf Hitler. Cecil Rhodes, Winston Churchill, may God bless his damn soul in the grave, and may it never come up. May God connect the north side, the sewer system, to his grave. And the same for de Gaulle. And the same for Lincoln. And we could put Washington in the grave too. Because black people ain't got no right standing up to say nothing on February the 22nd. Washington, at the date of independence, was still selling black people to Barbados for molasses. Every man that signed the Declaration of Independence was a slaveholder, including Thomas Jefferson. When the flag went up, it did not go up for black people. It went up for one Englishman fighting another Englishman. It went up for the English in America. By that time, they had all but exterminated the indigenous people they call Indians. Cecil Rhodes turned the African southern end of the continent into a sea of blood for the riches of himself and England. Cecil Rhodes was no different than Leopold, no different than any of the robber barons of the Americas who joined in with Stanley, Henry Morton Stanley, and Leopold II. Those men who brought about the Berlin Conference, which was held in November the 11th, 1884 to March the 15th, 1885, discussing how they're going to carve up Africa into the political geopolitics that Africa is now. A subsequent conference which was called by Leopold after they had given to Leopold the entire Congo as his personal estate. The United States government of America was a party to the Berlin Conference that helped to cut up Africa. And when we talk about the church, and when I talk, you may figure that why is he so angry? He is so emotional. Any black person that don't have no emotion, you're damn dead. If you could live under degradation as we do and don't have an emotional aspect about it, you're as dead as a cockroach. And cockroach aren't dead. You let one pass across your food and eat it and see if he's dead. You'll be dead. I don't have no use for European Christianity because it was a European bishop by the name of Bartholomew Las Casas in the year 1503 who joined in with Pope Martin V to bring Africans who were then in Spain after they had lost their power to the island of Haiti, which they call Hispaniola, and for the first time established chattel slavery. How can I have use when John Hawkins, the head of the British slave ship, the boat which he had as the flagship of his fleet was called the Jesus Christ. The Reverend John Hawkins, the bishop stood at the pier collecting 25 cents a head for each African that went on the slave ship to cross the Middle Passage. The church was made its fortune on the backs of black slaves. I say if a black man wants to be a Christian, he has a right to be, but be a black Christian. With a black Mary and a black Jesus. Don't tell me about no God. Jesus didn't have no color. If he didn't have no color, how the hell they saw him? And Mary was no virgin. Ain't no damn way no virgin gonna get pregnant by an angel that ain't got a penis. And there's a damn joke that tell you that angels don't have no sexual organ and one got Mary pregnant. Man, somebody's jiving. And then the same damn book tell you that James was Jesus' brother and James was older than Jesus. So Mary had a baby, went to the blacksmith shop and got back a new virginity. That's what the young brothers were talking about. Fairy tales. And brothers, don't worry about it. When you say son of a bitch and things like that, everybody here know what you mean. If they don't know, they're son of bitches. I told you, people with PhD, when they drink too much whiskey, get inebriated. And those of us who don't have PhD just get plain old drunk. Had a friend of mine up at Cambridge, and the sucker was so glad he could speak the King English to the extent to which he did. Came and told me one morning, Joe, decipher this. Extricate the quadruple out the vehicle, come unto me in the morning, I shall compensate thee. I say, oh, you said, you sucker, you. Is that I must take out a goddamn horse out the carriage and come in the morning, you're going to pay me for it. I says, if I take the car out the horse tonight, you're going to pay or you're going to die. See, now all that nonsense about extricate the quadruple out the vehicle. Huh? Now that's a brother that's trying to show off his training. There's a difference between being trained and being educated. For a long time, I was a trained SEAL. Man, I believed that all them degrees and paper and whatnot was a lot until my father caught hold of me one day. And he said to me, son, I got to talk to you because I sent you to school, but you're not, isn't that what I sent you for? You something wrong. You didn't come back the right way, son. So let's sit down here. Let's talk. You know, my father and I always had a conversation. We never had an argument. My father believed in modern way of bringing up his children. When I argue with him, I find myself flat on the ground with blood in my mouth. I was modern. So I learned, got the message that you don't argue with the man who's paying the rent in the house. And so my father said, sit down, son, and with all the degrees and things, I sat down, realizing the situation if I didn't. And he says, son, contemplate on this a little. He says, son, the man that gave out the first degree, what did he have? Man, dad walked out the room, he didn't wait no more. And he says, don't give me the answer now. Wait till you're about 100. And then tell me. Because I know the answer. That's why I asked you a question. And you know that when I found that thing out, it took days. I've been bothering with that thing. And I found out that the man that set up the rules for the degree had none. So I found out then that you could become educated without a degree. But going through the formalized education is an easier way. It's not the only way. Because most of the PhDs I know need to go to first grade and come up again. Because they look no different to me than trained seals. What good if you get all that training and you cannot apply it to your individual situation? What good is it if you go to an institution where you're one of 3 black students out of 40,000 and you come trying to implement a white society value into a black one? What good? I see a bunch of black ministers talking some damn nonsense about illegitimate children. That sucker should be shot with doo-doo. What you want a black woman to do? She don't have enough money for divorce. They didn't have no abortion in those days. She couldn't afford contraceptives. You wanted to plug up her vagina? No, go on, sister. Get your man. It's a normal thing to do. You're going to be some Puritan. The Puritans came here and all mess up the Indians with that jive. Ain't nothing wrong with sex. That guy Paul, some woman got hold of Paul and blew his mind. And he hated women and brought that nonsense into religion. The sex is bad. Look how the book started out. Adam and Eve got some sex going for them. And God, who said, let us make man, God had his old lady with him. And God is going to get mad because Adam and Eve suck it to each other. Now, how the hell are you going to have children if they didn't suck it to each other? God is man, and then he says to her, go do it again, go multiply. And then you're going to tell some woman, some young 22-year-old woman, husband in Vietnam for the army, she must stop having sex because her husband in Vietnam fighting for somebody else. Now, if he's stupid enough to leave that young, strong, healthy, vibrant woman to go fight for somebody else, she got a right to give it a run all. Man, we got to come up with some standards and values of our own. We've got to establish values of our own. Northwestern University, Harvard University got no right setting no values for black people. They don't know how we think. We are going to set our own morality, our own standards, because we have our own particular problems and situation, and it isn't the same as the whites in America. We've got to revise ourselves from top to bottom. The revolution means cultural as well as physical, as well as mental, as well as spiritual, philosophically and otherwise. Let me tell you, it got to be that way. There is no other way. Black men have tried to integrate all the time. He's tried everything that he's been asked to do. And he didn't come here in slavery for the first time. That's another damn lie. Let's get that one straight in history. Because I'm not going to run down a heap of dates without giving a sociological, tying it up sociologically and politically. Columbus did not sail a ship to America. I read Spanish history and I read Spanish, and I spent 2 years in the University of Barcelona and read Spanish history. How the hell could Columbus discover America when the textbook tell you that he was locked up in the bridge? There was a mutiny. The same textbook tell you how the sucker's been locked up in the bridge, and he still discover America. How you gonna be? If you lock up in the bridge in the hole, you can't be sailing the ship at the same time. Pietro Alonso Nino, the captain of the Santa Maria, who was the admiral of the Moorish Navy when the Moors still ruled Spain, which was up to 7 years before Columbus was given the ship. He was in charge of it, with Pedro Alonso Nino in charge of the navigation. And Columbus, number one, could not discover America. Can you imagine the Indians sitting down, watching them coming in, discovering them? Man, it's the way that history is twisted. Cortez comes to the Aztec country, which is now called Mexico. He doesn't understand the high culture the people had developed with their own pyramids, and he destroyed it. Juan Pizarro comes to the Incas in Peru, meet a high culture, doesn't understand it, he destroyed it. And they talk about bringing civilization. How can you bring civilization and you exterminate nations of people? What kind of civilization are you referring to? We look and examine the Africans. They can't let us even read it. They can't even teach us European history correctly because we would find too many Africans in there. Let me just point out some of the reasons why they don't want to let black studies be on its own, because we will start talking about Emperor Septimus Severus, the African who became emperor of all Rome. That include Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, Germany, France, Spain, Greece. Talk that talk, Joe. Yeah, I'm emotional because when I was small in school, even in Ethiopia, them Englishmen got in there and didn't let me know my history. I went and, look, I'm not putting no damn Cambridge PhD behind my name in my book. I only use that when I'm dealing with them sick people. Because they didn't teach me none of this. I had to go and dig morning, noon, and night and spend every dime I could get. And I stole some. And if I get in the bank in Michigan, I will steal more. I have no scruples. 40 acres and a mule don't pay me for the slavery, the enslavement of my ancestors. That's no promise for me. You can never pay. Fort Knox, it only got the beginning of what they owe me. I don't know what they owe you. Let me go ahead about this thing here we're talking about. Septimus Severus died in York, England, that African emperor of the Roman Empire. And his son Caracalla was the one that fed the Christians to the lion. Why did he stop? Man, look, I'm going to run you down something here. Two little things going to show you why they can't let you control this history book. They're going to always have to be somebody in the top. When you write a book and you want to get it published, you're going to have to get somebody up there endorse your book. Now, how the hell I'm going to write a history about what that man did to me and have him to say if it's good or bad? Oh, no. I mean, let me talk about the damn thing I'm going to talk about. See, sometimes this thing gets me kind of little heated, you know. Now, you see, I'm going to show you why they make you believe that black people ain't black, because you'll find some black people saying, well, since we came to America, we ain't black because with slavery and all that, we had white parents and white this and white that and all that. Yeah. But if they still stay white in Europe and they had black parents and black parents and black parents, and they still white, let me tell you, even the Queen of England is a nigger. Oh, let me jump back in her genealogy tonight and tell you a thing or two about that nigger cousin of ours. It would seem that history said, I know some of you who got the Queen is relative to, I hope you don't get very sad because I'm upsetting much of your apple cart tonight, but that's the way it is. Now, it would seem that history says that there was a fellow by the name of Alessandro de' Medici. And Alessandro de' Medici was the reigning Duke of Italy. See? Florence. Now, who was Alessandro de' Medici? He was the son of Cardinal Constantine. Now, that got you all shook up already. How could the cardinal have a son? You know, it ain't long that they stopped sucking it to women all over the place. And they still do it. Ask some of the sisters. Now, this Cardinal Constantine became Pope Constantine also. Well, his woman, not his wife. Hear them talking about morality? The cardinal's woman, a black woman, another man's wife. Man, don't trust them guy telling you about morality. As soon as they tell you about morality, take your right leg and slap it together, because that guy is the same guy coming after your wife. And if you ain't got a paper for the woman, you know he ain't gonna worry about you at all. Now, Cardinal, so we established, number one, Anna, this black woman, from Ethiopia, that soul sister. And this white cardinal got this boy, Alessandro de' Medici. You see a picture of him in Black Man of the Nile. I got a good picture of him there, taken from his own, the palace that is now a museum. And Alessandro de' Medici married, listen to this now, this black boy marries the daughter of the Emperor of Austria. This black boy and the daughter of the Emperor of Austria had 14 children. Strong black boy. Since we're talking about that, and you girls clap your hand when I said that, I got 9 and more to go. Now, one of those girls became the Queen of France. Now, you know, there wasn't only one black queen in France. You know, Josephine, also Napoleon's wife, came from Martinique. A black sister from Martinique in the Caribbean. Okay, we'll go on a little further. Now, one of those girls married the Grand Duke of the House of Hesse, Germany. That girl became the mother of George III. George III is the great-grandparent of the present nigger queen of England. We got our family in the strangest places. I think Dick Nixon better check his records very close. Oh, Cousin Agnew. Ain't that going to be the day? I think John Birch had better do a little thing of watching his too. I have to check him up soon. Because you know 100,000 black men that Hannibal carried in there, another 100,000 that Tarik carried in there, then the Emperor Septimus Severus carried a lot of them up to England and Ireland and Scotland. Don't talk about what the Egyptians and the Ethiopians carried into Greece when they captured that. It's a strange history book. Well, now you may say that's England, but they ain't white. Well, let's go a little higher up to Sweden. See, I like to deal with, when you're dealing with something, you go right where the nitty-gritty is. See what I mean? That's what the sister said. Don't play if you're going to do something. Do it. Playing around. Next thing you know, I'm going to have to go out in the street and get things straight. Well, before she got to get things straight, let's play a little more. It would seem again that Napoleon Bonaparte had two black generals, Alexander Dumois and Count Bernadotte. He got in an argument, it seems, with Bernadotte and sent him to be ambassador to Sweden. The Swedes were afraid of Napoleon, and they beseeched Bernadotte to remain there, become a Swede, help them against Napoleon, and when the king died, they'll make him their king. The king died. The king had no heirs. This black man became king. He was still strong. Took on the princess. Slapped 15 babies to that princess. And them children are still on that throne. Man, Lord, we even got blonde niggas. Well. It would seem, that history had played some very serious tricks. And those of us, yet the Europeans maintain that they are Caucasians. Now, if the Europeans did the same to us in America, why we still Africans? You know what I mean? When a conquering people comes into another man's land or enslave them, they don't take the blame for their mistreatment. I am not ashamed of slavery. All of mankind have suffered it. And I have had Europeans as my slaves, too. They seem to forget when I went in there for 700 years. Hannibal stood at the gates of Rome for 30. They seem to forget that. And that it was another African that caused Hannibal to remove from the gate. You see, some people say it was Scipio Africanus. But that wasn't Scipio's name. Scipio was Scipio Nasisca. Before he went to Rome, Africanus is the name the Romans gave him. Because the Romans named that continent Africa. Not the indigenous people, they call it Al-Kebulan. That country was called Ethiopia by the Greeks. Ortegia, Oceania, Hesperia. Those are all the different names the Greeks called it. You see, I haven't spoken about Ghana and Mali and all those things because that's what everybody who's talking about African history comes up and tell you. It's the usual thing. It sounds like a broken record. Because they want you to believe that only in West Africa you were. Another thing, they tell you that you only came from West Africa. That's a damn lie. You came from all over Africa. The slave ports, the shipping ports, notoriously called factories, were primarily on the West Coast, but they brought you from all over. And those of us who gone Muslim crazy, let me talk to you about that. You've gone from the fire to the frying pan. You mean you're going to still get your behind burnt, maybe a little slower. The Arabs enslaved the Africans before the Europeans did. In 640, the year 18 of the Hegira. And the Hegira means nothing more than the year Muhammad fled Mecca to the oasis of Yathrib and had to call upon the emperor of Ethiopia to save him and send and tell the emperor, don't forget that my grandfather is an Ethiopian. And it was another Ethiopian that made Islam what it is, not Muhammad. Muhammad couldn't read and write. From the day he was born until the day he died. It was the man called Hatzad Bilal ibn Rabad who wrote the heavenly scene in the book called the Quran. Al-Hadith wrote most of its poems, another black man. It was that same Bilal became the first Muezzin, head of the embassies, treasurer of Islam, who served not only Muhammad, but Abu Bakr and Omar the Great, who died at 112 years old. Yeah. You join in religion again without knowing the history of the religion. What good is the Bible without the history behind it? That goes for the Quran and the Torah or any religion. If you don't know the history of your religion, you're nothing but a damn fool in the religion.